Story 1. I have a story about this. I was working on a team doing technical work on devices. We all sat in the same general area, but due to seating constraints, my desk was off to the side, away from the others. We got a new team member who was very friendly and polite. He even stopped me in a hallway and gave me money to use at the snack machine we were standing by. At the end of the day, he left, and the team was talking about him. I said, "Oh, he's great, right?" Everyone looked at me as if I had grown a second head. Apparently, he was a terrible person, refusing to do work and even stealing food from coworkers on his first day. He was the son of an important salesperson higher up the corporate ladder. I guess he mistook me for a boss because of where I was sitting. He was trying to impress me while being terrible to everyone else. He was fired the same day he was hired. Who knows if trying to impress the right person would have helped. Story 2. She started by learning all my insecurities. I thought it was because she cared. Later, she used each one as a weapon. Story 3. My ex-mother-in-law was very kind to me even after her son and I separated. She supported me living with them, going back to high school, and working part-time as a waitress to pay for diapers and other necessities. She stayed home and looked after the baby. Then one day, she came home and said, "The adoption is in progress." She expected me to be happy that she wanted my baby as her own. I moved out, received public assistance until I finished high school, and spent the next 7 years fighting her for custody. Her son played a minor role in the court battles. Story 4. He learned everything about me, then proceeded to make me out to be crazy when, in reality, he was cyberbullying me, stalking me, and doing other horrific things. It took me being off social media for a while and moving for him to finally leave me alone. I never knew someone like him existed outside of Lifetime movies. He caused me to nearly take my own life because I was so terrified of him. Now, when I see or am near anyone who has even the smallest red flag, I am instantly on guard. Years of therapy have helped me, and I am just grateful to be out of that situation. Story 5. An old friend was a perfect straight-A student in high school. He had the best girlfriend, was very good-looking, and was also super kind and polite. Although poor, he did the best he could. He held charity events and sent money to those in need. A few years later, I heard he was arrested for murder. During the trial, many disturbing details emerged about him abusing some of the children in families he helped raise money for. During his trial, he took his own life. It has been 2 years since then. Story 6. My dad and brother stole all of my belongings while I was laid up with stage 4 cancer and undergoing chemotherapy. I am referring to an entire farm operation. We share the same name, and he pretended to be me. My dad was caught having the assets while receiving Social Security disability insurance, and the state took my land, farming equipment, and livestock to pay his debts. Despite my appeal to the Idaho Supreme Court, which ruled in my favor, it created a large exception allowing the state to seize my property. Story 7. My brother, he has been good to me for the most part. We collaborated a lot when we were younger. I edited all of his papers from undergraduate to law school, but I always knew he was a wolf. I just did not know he would do it to me. While in the doldrums of my career, I was working for my dad. My pay was based on the profits of the store I entirely ran with some residuals from other parts of the business. None of this was written in a formal contract but was based on several informal agreements founded on trust. One year, I nearly made more than $100,000. I told my brother this, thinking he would be happy for me. No, he was upset I was going to make more than him. So he called my dad and convinced him that if he continued with my sweetheart deal, Dad could be sued by my other siblings, so I got a massive pay cut. This is, of course, nonsense. The only person who could sue Dad was me for breach of contract, as the agreements were firm enough for a courtroom. My dad told me about the call from my brother, but when I asked my brother, he lied and said that Dad was confused. I decided to quit and started looking for a new job. I told my brother this, and he sent an email to try to convince me to stay, arguing it was beneficial for me. Somehow, I was able to see that he was just trying to protect his inheritance, as I was supposed to be running the store after Dad retired, for the benefit of the entire family. The final straw was when I asked him for patent advice a few months later. And he gave the one piece of advice a lawyer would never give: file it on your own and do not hire a lawyer. He has been blocked since. That was about 2 years ago, and I have no intention of changing anything. Story 8. When I was 9, a new boy moved into our street. He was kind, shared sweets, and always wanted to hang out. I thought I had made a real friend, but behind my back, he told others my secrets, things I had trusted him with. That is when I learned, not everyone who smiles at you means well. Some people are not friends. They are just good at pretending. Story 9. I was dating a Japanese international student who moved here by herself at 15 to attend private school. I met her when she was 20. Her father was very polite and liked to call me to speak in English, thanking me for inviting her to my family's home for holiday meals. He was a really kind man. He even hosted my friend at his vacation property when he found out my friend was traveling through Japan. My friend said, "He's covered in tattoos and travels with an entourage of very polite but dangerous-looking men. He is a Yakuza boss." My girlfriend never directly confirmed this because she said she didn't know about his business, but she mentioned he had tattoos and always traveled with an entourage. Story 10. I had a coworker who was pretty nice, friendly, and got along with almost everyone. Then I learned quickly that he would work very hard to push the blame onto someone else. If something went wrong and he was even 1% responsible, he would do everything possible to avoid getting in trouble. One time, there was a problem that resulted in a small discrepancy. He tried to blame it on me and another coworker, despite the fact that we logged everything and fully documented the counts. After that, I started adding hidden watermarks so he could not lie to pass the blame. Story 11. I have only met one child predator. I worked with him at a fast food restaurant. He had a very happy, energetic, and friendly personality. Exactly the kind of person children would want to be around. I believe this persona was intentional and predatory. He is in jail now, or at least he was the last time I checked. Story 12. A friend of mine confessed that he had a crush on me. He was always very sweet and kind to me. So we went on a few dates, but I wasn't feeling it and told him so. He wanted to stay friends. We both told each other about other people we went out with like we had before we had dated. He started seeing this woman who I shall call Annie. Little red flags kept popping up. For example, they considered themselves polyamorous. He told me he was going to stop seeing another woman because Annie said this other woman was exhibiting toxic behavior, showing up wherever he was and latching onto him at every event. Except she showed up at events surrounding a shared hobby, and everything he shared about her latching onto him seemed like run-of-the-mill, "I like you and want to be around you" behavior. So Annie started hanging out with the group. As much as I tried, I couldn't seem to become friends with her. I tried to talk to her and she'd give me one-word answers. I figured she was shy and would warm up eventually. Fast forward a few months and they get engaged. They invited all the couples in our friend group to their engagement party except for my then boyfriend and me. So I asked my friend why that was. He said they only invited couples who they were close with, except they weren't any closer with one of the couples than they were with my boyfriend and me. The male half of that couple isn't the kind to let sleeping dogs lie, so he called them out on it. Cue a sort of intervention where I find out that apparently I am a toxic person who was leading on my friend, and after I broke his heart because he had fallen in love with me, I continued to torture him by telling him about all the men I was seeing, which was 2, and one I only went on 2 dates with. He would then go crying to Annie and she would console him. She had also talked to my ex and told everyone that I wasn't as innocent as I pretended to be regarding that breakup. She then basically gave my friend group an ultimatum that they should cut all ties with me because I was a liar, manipulative, and a toxic person. Otherwise, she and my friend couldn't remain friends with them. My friend barely said 2 words during all this. Annie even messaged my boyfriend privately and told him that he should break up with me because I'm an evil liar who will ruin his life with my toxicity. Luckily, my friend group knew me better than that, so the only thing I lost was one two-faced friend, and he gained a woman who's going to run roughshod over him for the rest of his life. Last I heard they got married and he's not the bubbly, happy person he used to be. Story 13. My family members. I grew up and realized how inappropriate their behavior really is, so I decided to keep my distance. Story 14. Gentle, sweet, Shy man. A bit neglected but clean. Funny and attentive, even if somewhat odd. Eventually, I moved in with him. Everything was going well until we were doing an online science quiz together. I answered a question correctly that he got wrong. He completely lost his temper, called me stupid, said the quiz was wrong, and criticized my education. He continued angrily, and when I tried to argue, he insisted that I apologize to him and reduced me to tears. He could switch emotions so quickly that I never knew what would set him off. After any social interaction, such as a meal with friends, he would list all the ways I had failed. I grew up in a very dysfunctional family and endured 4 years of similar behavior, gaslighting, and a major mental breakdown of my own before finally escaping. He also tried to persuade me to take my own life. Story 15. Anna was the leader of a Christian group I volunteered with as a college student. She was extremely happy all the time to a point where it began to feel forced. One morning, I was supposed to volunteer packaging meals at a food pantry. I woke up sick and called off. A couple of hours later, she emailed me in all caps, calling me selfish, unreliable, and unable to follow through with work. Multiple paragraphs. I did not want to package food while sick. Also, it was for volunteer hours, not work, so there was no issue with calling off. Anna called me privately to her office to hear my explanation for why I couldn't make it. In person, she was super nice again and pretended like she had not sent the unhinged email. The meeting went fine, but I avoided her from then on. Months later, she was fired for a series of issues, mostly allegedly having an affair with one of her student volunteers who was the same age as her children. Story 16. This is kind of the opposite, but a new girl had moved into our school district and she was immediately befriended by a group of boys. After school, these boys would always go to an empty barn and smoke. They asked her if she wanted to join them. She said yes. This was literally the first day they met. I remember thinking, girl, you just met these 5 boys. They are all kind of huge because they are athletes, and you were going to go to some remote place alone with them? I had known these boys since elementary school, and they were 5 of the kindest, most decent boys you can imagine, but she did not know that. Story 17. A teacher in high school was nice at first until one day he got mad and punished me for not listening to him. The next day before class, he sat next to me and told me I should hang out with him and be dropped off at his house. I ignored him. A year later, I was walking to my next class, and he was going the other way. For some reason, his face was purplish red, and he looked enraged. I ignored him again, but in my peripheral vision, I saw him staring at me, his head turning as I passed him. I never saw him again and hope not to. Story 18. Realizing at the company meeting that the friendly new guy is actually the person who always takes credit for my ideas. Lesson learned. Always check for claws under the fluff. Story 19. A man I had worked with, a fellow Catholic and married, had trained me on the job and once offered me a ride home. When I got home, I began to say goodbye, but he insisted on coming upstairs. I realized then that I had misunderstood his character. I never spoke to him again or saw him again. He spent about 30 seconds in my apartment before I pushed him out. I honestly did not know what to do because I trusted him so much. What a terrible person. Story 20. Narcissistic, abusive ex. Some family members still spoke kindly about him years after the breakup. Missing him. They did not all know about the abuse, nor did I feel comfortable sharing specifics. However, by that time in my healing journey, I put my foot down and told them he was a horrible person and abusive. They were never to speak of him like that again in my presence. Story 21. Currently experiencing this situation. I recently reconnected with my childhood best friend after not speaking for a couple of years due to a disagreement we had when we were 16. He has a different best friend now, as do I, and he wants us to be friends. I have spent the past couple of months getting to know her, fully embracing friendship because I genuinely wanted to be her friend. I really thought she liked me. She is always smiling and kind when we hang out, only to find out that she has been talking about me behind my back to all of my friends and making fun of me. Story 22. My biological older half-brother, whom I had never met before, played the victim and freeloaded an entire Las Vegas trip off me and my family, not his. He had a clumsy, helpless energy that was warm but also pitiable, so people would help him out and cover expenses for him. He was the type to show up to dinner with no money, sit there and say, "Oh, I don't need anything. I have food in my bag back in the room," until someone offered to pay for his sushi. I confronted him about these antics one night after noticing a pattern. His whole demeanor disappeared, replaced by a cold, sinister look, like I had just seen the mask slip. He flatly stated he had no idea what I was talking about before returning to his cheery expression. I have never felt so creeped out by a person. We ended up getting into a fight the next day. I kicked him out and told him never to talk to me again. I don't care if we share a deadbeat father. You are nothing and no one to me but a parasite. Story 23. Someone I was dating got very close to me and then confessed that they were a pedophile while they were drunk. Story 24. I grew up in Hong Kong, attending an international school. I was supposed to go to university in the United Kingdom, but I refused to leave Hong Kong. My parents left. I coached basketball for the Young Men's Christian Association and stayed overnight in budget hotels, which were the cheapest option. Eventually, my brother finished university and joined me. He got a job at a local school, and we looked for a flat. The estate agent did not want to show us the cheapest places because they thought no Westerner would live there. We were broke and lived in very small flats, but it was near the clubbing area. I eventually got jobs coaching international school teams, but was still desperately broke. Over time, we learned about all the cheap spots where service workers went when bars closed and where people who used drugs gathered. There was one bar that always had an old Cantonese man at the bar, always drinking whiskey. My brother and I would end up there probably once a month, always too drunk. Eventually, we became friends with the old man. Uncle Larry told us stories about leaving China and his family behind when he was a child, hiding on a boat, then working his way up in a factory in Mong Kok. He was able to skip queues when he nodded toward us. We would always go over and politely chat with him. He was a kind Cantonese man but stern, like Mr. Miyagi. One late night, we went to the club and saw a lot of police outside. The club was shut down. Over the next week, we learned that a couple of expatriate bankers were allowed in the club and got a bit too friendly with Uncle Larry. So Uncle Larry called a few people and had them hospitalized. Apparently, he owned the club and was a well-known member of a triad. We always suspected this because people looked at us strangely when we spoke to him, and everyone showed him a lot of respect. The lesson is, if you are ever in Hong Kong and see an old man drinking alone at the bar, he may own the whole place and might be a proper gangster. Story 25. I have encountered two men in the workplace who wore their evangelical faith like a badge of honor. However, in the workplace, they ignored the teachings of Jesus and treated people with abuse, lies, and office politics that seemed inspired by Game of Thrones. Story 26. The Human Resources Department and Nursing Management for Warren State Hospital in Warren, Pennsylvania, do not demonstrate genuine care for people. They appear to serve only their own interests. Story 27. This old man I used to know told me he was a guitarist and had played for many big bands. He tried to make a move on me, but I found out he couldn't even play. Story 28. My former spouse used my cancer and epilepsy to manipulate me. Fortunately, I divorced that person. I have remarried, and we are both very happy. Story 29. It was my friend. She was there for me after a bad breakup, always checking in, always supportive. I thought she genuinely cared. But over time, I realized she thrived on my pain. She subtly put me down, isolated me from others, and made me feel like I couldn't trust anyone but her. By the time I saw it, I felt completely alone. She was not a friend. She just liked having control over someone weaker. Story 30. This is a sheep in wolf's clothing. For the past 20 years, I have lived in the last factory town in the south of England. The factories shut down, but there was still a lot of government housing. There was a football team that always caused trouble and often had helicopters. When I was a teenager, the local kids always tried to get me to fight them. It is famously rough. Over time, we had more immigrants and became a bit wealthier. Tata, the large Indian conglomerate, opened nearby. I am not sure if I aged out of it or if I grew bigger, but people stopped trying to pick fights with me. Outside the cheapest pub, there was always a big fist fight every Friday. I eventually felt confident walking through this huge public housing estate with poorly lit streets, and no one bothered me. One night, I was walking through this public housing estate, and in the distance, I saw a group of men in tracksuit bottoms carrying large cans. It looked like they had been drinking and were walking as a group. I tensed up, thinking about a way to avoid them. Then they walked under a streetlight, and trying not to look directly, I caught a glimpse. It was a group of middle-aged Indian men in tracksuits, not carrying beers but tubes of shuttlecocks. Story 31. Catholic school Sister Clementine was a real piece of work. Sister Regina at the next school was cut from the same cloth. Let's just say those brides of Christ had not learned much from his teaching. Yet they were the ones in charge of teaching a group of vulnerable children. Story 32. Somewhat amusingly, a longtime friend who spent too much time around a manipulative sociopath became exactly the same. I was busy with my own life, and once she started acting like a wolf in sheep's clothing, I helped her move out of my place and stop dealing with her. In hindsight, I almost felt sorry for her, but I had been very kind and patient, so I am glad she left. Some nice times, but all good things come to an end. Story 33. I trained a man who was one of the most helpful and friendly people I have ever worked with. My boss asked him to correct his mistakes on his timesheet and expense reports. It was straightforward, and she communicated this without any attitude or bullying, kindly showing him how to fix it in the email. I kept suggesting that he should be cross-trained in other areas because he was underutilized. I could not understand why she would not accept him. Then, she showed me his response to her email. The level of anger he expressed toward a woman giving him instructions made me want him off my team immediately. I had a team with both men and women, and there was no way I would let him stay. It surprised me that he had not been fired, and I offered to do it for her. Story 34. I once worked with a colleague who always presented themselves as a team player, constantly volunteering to help others and taking credit for collaborative successes. It turned out they were subtly undermining projects they were not leading, spreading misinformation to make their own ideas look better. It was a frustrating situation because, on the surface, they seemed so supportive. It made me realize how important it is to look beyond surface appearances and really pay attention to how someone operates, not just what they say. I have found approaches that leverage advanced data can help clarify situations like that, revealing patterns of behavior you might otherwise miss. Do you think recognizing manipulative tactics is something people can improve with practice? Story 35. My half-sister was sharing my voice notes to a large group chat where people made memes and mocked me, taking pleasure in my pain. For a long time, my TikTok page was filled with an algorithm that was intentionally bizarre and cruel. I thought TikTok was an evil, hateful app until I saw someone else using it and their feed was all positive. Then it all clicked that something was going on with my phone. My father passed away in the middle of all this, and my sister accused me of using black magic against my own dad, which I told her I did not even understand. I blocked my sister, bought a new phone, changed carriers and numbers, and everything became normal and kind on TikTok and my apps again. Story 36. I encountered a classic wolf in sheep's clothing. You know the type. All smiles, initially super helpful, and I honestly thought I had lucked out meeting them. We connected quickly with many shared interests and good conversations, and it felt solid. But then, little things started feeling off. They would throw weird backhanded compliments or act differently when other people were around. I kept brushing it off because I did not want to seem dramatic. Then they began subtly twisting things. Stuff I said got repeated in strange ways, or they acted like they were looking out for me, but really, it was just control in disguise. They made me question myself. Story 37. I see them all the time. It is kind of wrong to call them a wolf, though. Wolves have a sense of duty and care toward their pack. Story 38. Artificial intelligence text analysis helpers and artificial intelligence operators are wolves in sheep's clothing. They are fabricated, and their purpose is not simply to provoke anger or to collect karma, as you might think. Story 39. They emotionally drained me to get my attention with their self-victimized, chosen chaos, telling me how much I mattered to them for 2 years before failing to show me that in real life or ever giving me what I gave them daily. Story 40. I trusted him with my hardest struggles only for him to use them as weapons against me when he was leaving. Story 41. I had a friend who would tell everything I confided in her to everyone. I found out because someone who did not like me was talking about something I had only shared with that friend. I confronted her, and she denied it, so I silently cut her off. She still thinks we were just good friends who lost touch. Story 42. Dated a guy who seemed perfect, kind, respectful, and charming. Took me months to realize he was just really good at pretending. The real him was controlling and manipulative. Never again. Story 43. My parents pretended to support us and be there for us during our first pregnancy. As soon as the baby was born, they tried to take him away. Story 44. New manager. I am getting a strange vibe, but she is new and an external hire. Over time, the red flags become more frequent. Last-minute work demands, followed by complaints that I am not doing those tasks despite my efforts to ensure timely completion. Interference with the team's engineering plan that borders on the absurd. I already committed to the directors that the team will complete it in half the time, but with 150 times the features. Splitting responsibilities between 3 different managers with undefined accountabilities. We managed to deliver the product on time. At official review, the report contains easily disprovable falsehoods and claims that the project succeeded only because of others. I resign. Later, I found out she was instructed to reduce headcount before taking over the area and intentionally set me up to fail. When that failed, she resorted to dishonesty. My only regret is not leaving sooner. Morale of the story. If you get a bad feeling about your management chain, do not wait for confirmation. Story 45. Ex-coworker. In the beginning, I thought she was standoffish because she was shy and in a new environment, and also because she was a new mother. However, she was particularly two-faced. She was very sweet to anyone she perceived as higher up but treated her equals poorly. She tried multiple times to get me and several others in trouble for things we had proof we did not do. I later found out that she tried to advance her position by inappropriate means with a supervisor at the facility, which led to her being essentially kicked out. That supervisor was also fired for breaking laws to benefit a particular group, accepting bribes on the side. It is a shame because they both appeared outwardly respectable, but in reality, they were dishonest and untrustworthy. I feel sorry for that supervisor's partner, who had to discover the true character of the man with whom she had a child. Story 46. I was raised by one which caused trauma, but because she was in sheep's clothing, it could have been worse. Story 47. 4, actually. All of whom I met through an online game called Guild Wars 2. Absolute narcissists. Also, for clarification, I can tell the difference between someone being on the autism spectrum and being narcissistic. I am on the autism spectrum myself, professionally diagnosed. Story 48. I sort of am one in real life, but not in a bad way, well, mostly. I long ago learned to separate family life, work life, and street life. I am also a recovering addict. I am a large, in shape, somewhat intimidating-looking man, but that's not the reason why I consider myself a wolf. It's more about the contrast I put myself through. I am a very nice, sociable person in real life. Once people get over my appearance, they realize I am mostly a teddy bear. The problem comes when men get used to the teddy bear and take me for a mark. I hide my street intellect the best I can because it's based on things I am not proud of. However, it's there. The average guy arguing with me at work has no idea how many lowlifes I know who are always down for a jack move. They have no idea about the weaponry I keep tucked away, the weaknesses and strengths I've already calculated, the pure way in which I don't care if I am threatened, and all the little bits of information I remember about everyone I come in contact with. Years of smoking, wheeling, and dealing mixed with many violent altercations have honed a lot of skills I never even knew people had when I was young. My intuition when it comes to reading people almost scares me because it is so accurate. Not to say I am impervious in any way, but I literally feel sorry for the average family man Joe Blow who overreacts with me on a bad day. If I just use my size and punish them physically, that would be the best thing that could happen to them. It goes far downhill from there. People in workplaces tend to rely too much on conditions and rules to keep them safe. All that is just figurative. The line between civility and savagery is much, much thinner than what guys like that think. It's funny because I never bully people. As a matter of fact, I am an underdog lifter. It's just funny how you can be nice as all get out, yet some guys still have to push it. Story 49. I realized who he was the moment I saw him in that courtroom, and it completely floored me. I felt confused and afraid. None of it was a wise, enlightening experience. I did not feel powerful at all. But I had the knowledge, and now it has taught me to move in silence. Story 50. Those are some of the worst encounters, and I wish we had blinders to reveal the true person beneath the facade. Story 51. I dated a girl many years ago. She was a few years older than me, sweet as an angel in public, but behind closed doors, she was a different person. It was fun as long as it lasted. Story 52. Met a girl at work who always offered to assist with my projects. By assist, she meant taking credit during meetings and disappearing when real work appeared. I learned that wolves do not always growl. Sometimes they just carbon copy your boss. Story 53. The second generation, from 2008 to 2011, United States domestic market Ford Focus may have only 140 horsepower. It may be an economy vehicle. It may have a 4-speed automatic transmission or a 5-speed manual transmission if you were lucky. It may look ordinary in regular traffic. However, if the road has enough curves and no straight sections, if your tires are decent, and if you, the driver, are skilled enough, then you can keep up with a 2024 5.0 Ford Mustang. Story 54. I used to run large events and got to know other event organizers. There's a saying by Sun Tzu, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. One thing I learned is that by being friendly, helpful, and kind, some people see that as a weakness, which quickly reveals those individuals, users, abusers, and takers. For the most part, I can sense and identify those people, avoid them, and help others avoid them by exposing their behavior. Part of that is letting them believe my attention is what they need for validation. I have been fooled, though. I am not invulnerable. Those who play the long con or remain hidden just beyond the radar are scattered throughout the event planning business. One of them was someone who, in hindsight, was a sociopath and pathological liar. She had advanced from my own event, working under me, and I was pleased when she struck out on her own. But she was merely gathering connections the entire time. I didn't see that until she executed a grand scheme, hosting a huge event after a series of successful ones, then taking the money and disappearing. She defrauded vendors, DJs, guests, and the event venue. She left her husband to deal with the fallout, but nothing was in his name, so he had no recourse. It turned out the limited liability company she operated was a sham, and even if there were a lawsuit, there was nothing to sue. She fled the East Coast to Los Angeles, squandered the money, and has followers who believe she is flawless and admire her in an embarrassing way. A few friends keep an eye on her and occasionally report on her latest claims and antics. She has a cult personality, portraying herself as someone who was once downtrodden but, due to her plucky spirit, dominated this man's world and emerged victorious. Her stories follow the same pattern, rising from the ashes repeatedly. She is always the victim, always has a bold moment, and always comes out on top in every story. She has claimed everything from participating in mixed martial arts to being born blind, several different races, and various disorders. It's always the same pattern. I am embarrassed because I supported her and helped her build connections to succeed. I recognized she was a disaster far too late. Story 55. I dated my former best friend after 5 years of knowing each other in high school. In my senior year, I found out he was a child predator. Story 56. I was 15 back then, and I was out with 2 friends. We were walking beside the road when one of them had the idea to go to a shop he knew and ask for a cigarette. As we walked past that shop, he told me to go because I was tall and looked more mature. He also put $10 on the table, and I couldn't refuse the free money. I went to the guy with a beer bottle in one hand and scrolling through a video on the other, and asked, "Can I have a cigarette?" The man looked at me with a grim expression for a few seconds, as if scanning me. His expression didn't change and looked like he didn't care. He said nothing and pointed to another man leaning against a wall. I went up to that man and asked the same question. He scanned me the same way and suddenly grabbed my hand. "How old are you?" he asked. That was when I noticed he had a holstered pistol on his waist. He was an undercover police officer. When I looked back, my two friends, who were waiting at the gate, had already started running. I managed to pull my hand free from his grip and joined them. I didn't look back. We ran half a kilometer back home and couldn't speak for 2 minutes because we were so shocked. I never hung out with those two friends again. Story 57. Potentially every coworker I have ever worked with. However, I would not say all. Maybe I just did not discover the issue hiding in the rear. Story 58. I worked at a rental car company, and my boss hired a new employee. He said she would be a great asset, a cool person, hard worker, bubbly, and great with customers. He paired her with me for a trial run, and she helped me for a day cleaning cars and assisting customers. A few days later, when she officially got the job, she told my boss that I made her do everything while I did nothing. She said I was rude to her when all I said was, "Hey, could you check that car's oil?" She also claimed I took an extended lunch break, but I had only gone down the road to get sandwiches. Luckily, my boss didn't believe her and ignored the complaint. A few weeks later, she told higher management that I was having an affair with the boss. She even sent them photos of the clock and the office to show that I was not there on time. This person seemed down to earth at first but completely changed and revealed unpleasant behavior. Story 59. The person kept going ba-ba, and for a moment I thought, okay, maybe this is some kind of canine with a speech impediment. So I said, "Remember your friend Balto?" But apparently that overstepped a line because then he attacked my face. I have no nose now. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.